Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations, just look for this orange box over on the website, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'm gonna send you that guide for free. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a review of the Canon 35mm f1.4 RF VCM L lens. This is their first 35mm L lens. Now, prior to this, they have a 35 1.8 that is just a regular RF lens that's super slow focusing. It's a macro-ish type lens, but it also is not very expensive, and it was one of the early ones that came out. This is a true to life L lens. Now, before I get too far into this, I want to tell you what I photographed. I went out to Lancaster, PA, where there was a Civil War reenactment going on, and it was amazing. I had a fantastic time there interacting with these Civil War reenactors. They loved getting their photos taken, from portraits to wide angles to actions of the fight scenes going on. They were awesome. I highly recommend, if anybody gets a chance to go out to a reenactment, that they take that opportunity, because it is great for photos. Now, I got a ton of photos, so at the very end of this, I am gonna run a slideshow that I think you should check out, because that's showing you real world situations, tons of great pictures. I was really happy with the results. So let's take a look at the outside of this lens. It is a pretty compact design. It's pretty small. Now, Sony has a 35 1.4, which is, it actually feels very similar in weight, but is slightly smaller on Sony's side, and Sony's lens is a fantastic 1.4. But on the outside of the lens, you've got your AF to manual, you have one custom button right here, and then you have this iris lock switch. So you have an iris ring right here. This is your aperture. I move this and then I can rotate it. Now, it's all de-clicked, meaning there are no clicks between f1.4, 1.8, 2.8. It's all smooth. And this is really meant for video, not for shooting stills, because honestly, you do not need to change an aperture ring in this day and age when you're shooting with modern cameras. You lock it in and you control that inside of the camera. I don't like the fact that in order to lock it, I have to move the switch up and then move it all the way over, up, and then it locks in. That's kind of weird, but this is something that you should never have to touch unless you're gonna be doing video and you wanna go ahead and change that. Another thing I need to tell you is if you're putting this on anything currently that's not an R1 or an R5 Mark II, you can move this ring all you want when you're shooting stills and it will not affect your aperture at all. It's basically deactivated for that. It works in the video, and probably with firmware updates, it will allow you to do that, but you don't even need to do that. It's not something that you ever need to do. You have your control ring up here. I personally turn off the control ring at all times, and other than that, that is it. That is the outside of the lens. Now, if I take the back cap off, you do get a lens filter holder on the back, so you could put in gel filters here in the back, or on the front, if you want to put filters on there, you've got your 67mm filter thread with your 67mm lens cap right here. Now, in terms of weight, this is weighing in at 1.2 pounds or 555 grams. Keep in mind that the EF version of the 35 1.4 weighed in at 1.67 pounds or 760 grams. I have that right here. This is a chunker of a lens, and it is heavy. It's a nice lens, very heavy, slower focusing, but this is the EF version. If you have to choose between the two, I mean, I'm taking the RF version all day. Autofocus is going to be a heck of a lot better. It probably is a lot more expensive, though this is selling still for $2,000. This is actually cheaper. We'll get to the price at the end of this video. Now, you will notice that this lens does not have IS built in, but that's perfectly fine. I was using the Canon R3, and that has image stabilization. Basically, just about every single mirrorless camera that Canon has stabilization built in. That's one way that they can keep the lens smaller, is that they take that out or don't even put it in the first place. And I didn't miss. There was nothing that was either out of focus because the focus was off or needed to be stabilized because I wasn't shooting that slow. And in most slow situations these days, the image stabilization built into the bodies is perfectly good enough. Now, since I just talked about the autofocus and that I looked through the pictures and there's really nothing that's out of focus, which seems to be normal these days with the mirrorless cameras, and if your settings are right, what kind of motors do we have in here? We have VCM motors, which stands for voice coil motors. Yeah, I add the yeah. That's the first lens that is using that, but it still does have the nano USM motors to drive that as well. Now, basically, they're on a rail. You will notice that that is floating. So if you pick up this lens and you turn it down like this and you move it like this, you are gonna feel the elements shifting and moving. That is normal. They will lock in as soon as it's engaged on the camera and it has power going to it. It's just like, boom, it locks in and you don't have to worry about that. That is normal. Let me jump in here real quick because I wanna show you this photo taken with the 3514 and edited with FroPak 4, starting with Blue's Clues, followed by Brooklyn, C41, Copper Tone, which we'll come back to in just a minute because I want to tweak it. We've got DeLorean, High C, Kaleidoscope, Mel Brooks, Saltwater Taffy, Thick, Tintype, and Wet Hot American Summer. But something I haven't done in one of these videos before is I want to go here and tweak this file. With one click, this is what Copper Tone looks like. But to me, it still needs a little bit of tweaking. So I might pull down on some of the shadows. I don't like how orange it is, so I can pull out a little bit of orange. And that is the point of these presets, to give you a starting point so you can find what works best for you and then make it to taste. So boom, maybe I want a little bit of that, and that is where I'm gonna leave it. So look, if you wanna speed up your raw workflow or give yourself a great starting point like I did and then tweak from there, we created 14 all new custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at froknosphoto.com/FroPak4. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters, and if you decide to pick them up right now, they are currently on sale. Or if you wanna get the Grand Slam bundle that includes FroPak 1, 2, 3, and 4, you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, in terms of aperture blades, you have 11 of them in here, and you had 9 in the older EF version. Now, there's a lot of lens correction going on, a lot of digital lens correction going on when you have it on the body and when you bring it into Lightroom. What you see in your viewfinder is exactly what you're getting. When you put it into Lightroom, if you turn off lens correction, you will see that it actually is shooting a little wider. But the reason they're able to make these smaller is they're working with digital lens correction. So when you put it on, it's correcting and straightening things out. Case in point, look at the musket. This is what you get out of the camera with lens correction on. When you turn it off, you can see the line is no longer straight. This is not an issue with the lens. This is just what companies and all manufacturers are doing at this point when they have lens correction built into the lens. You can turn this off after the fact. One of the things that I do in some situations is I turn off the lens correction because sometimes I just like the frame better or I like the look of it better. One reason is vignetting. They automatically correct for vignetting, which sometimes makes the image way too bright in my opinion. So you can have lens correction on and then just drag that vignetting down because I think it creates a natural frame. I personally like having some vignetting. One other example here is this vertical portrait. When you put lens correction, when you turn it off, it looks bad. Like, it just doesn't look like a good portrait. Then when you turn it back on, you're like, yeah, that looks correct. So in this situation for the vertical portrait, I absolutely leave the lens correction on. Let me jump to this next picture where I wanted to get the detailed shot. So I tried to see how close I could get to the subject. I did this a few times where you'll see that the autofocus box turns orange to let me know that I can't get any closer and I'm within that minimum close focus distance. So I just backed up a little until it was blue again, but you can get within 11 inches. Like here is a photo of a musket just laying down on a cool looking blanket. These guys were dressed to the nines and they had all of the authentic looking stuff and it made for great images. I just zoom in here and look how sharp it is there on the 1858. That looks incredible. And you will notice with a lot of these images that I'm showing you is a specific look, a specific tone and color of my editing. Now, the reason that is I went to edit these the normal way that I do, but I didn't like the normal color. It didn't look authentic to the time. So I went through the different presets that we've created from FroPack 1 to FroPack 4, and I settled in on copper tone from FroPack 4. And I tweaked it ever so subtly. Remember, it's not always one click, but I clicked on it, I pulled out some orange, I changed some minor things, and I was like, that's the look. And that's the point of presets, to help you find that specific look for the situation that you're shooting in, and then I edited everything else with that exact preset. But I love the way the tones and the colors look in this. The sharpness is incredible. The background blur is very nice. It's what I would expect from a pro lens. I love the angle that I was able to get here in the little camp setup that they had. They had drums set up, they had barrels set up, and they had their tents set up, and it just makes for cool photos when they're sitting around talking or smoking their stogies or whatever they're doing. Or for this, in this case, we have a guy just standing up with his musket, but you have his tent, you have the lantern, you have a building in the background. One thing, a note of advice, is if you're in these situations where something's being reenacted, check your backgrounds, check your angles to make sure there's no parking lots over there, or that there's no person wearing fluorescent yellow or whatever in the background, that you don't have a modern day person take you out of the scene. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio or any other type of website, Squarespace is what I've been using for my personal website at jaredpolin.com for well over 10 years. It's simple, easy, affordable, and I don't need to know any coding. To get your 14-day free trial, head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Now, let's get back to the video. Now, continuing on, there was a general, I believe he's a general, riding a massive horse. So this gives me the opportunity, you focus in at 1.4 on the horse, and then you can see that the guy on the horse is softly, nicely out of focus. He looks really good, the background looks authentic, and that looks nice. Let's jump to this picture where I got closer, because how does the background look at 1.4? Looks nice and clean. Now, when you're looking at a picture like this, you love the elements in it. I love that you have the fence that leads you to the person. There's someone on the ground behind them just sitting there. That's what you're looking for when you're trying to tell your stories. And another thing, while they're waiting to start the back and forth and the volleying and running drills and shooting off some of their weapons, they all set their weapons up to just stand there. All the muskets were standing there, so a good thing to test out. Focus in on the muskets and have the background go out of focus. Now let's move out onto the battlefield. They allowed me to go out there. They said, just don't be downrange. And this was so cool to be able to get right next to the subjects while they're doing a skirmish drill. Now, you could see other people in the background. You can see muskets that have already fired because the powder is flying. I just love the feel and the look of the images. And I will tell you, using that modified copper tone from FroPack 4 really puts you into the time period and makes these images work so well. A couple more of them firing muskets. The focus just was spot on. You don't feel like you miss when you're shooting with these mirrorless lenses and mirrorless bodies. The focus is just so fast, you don't ever notice that it's actually focusing because it is lightning and blazing quick, and it's going to be that way on all of the R series cameras. One of the things to keep in mind with a hybrid lens like this that's built for video as well as stills is how's the focus breathing. And the focus breathing, for those who don't know, is if you have your frame set up and you change your focus and you focus on something at a distance or closer, the frame might change. And in this case, we noticed that focus breathing compared to older lenses has been reduced. And the last photo that I'll show you before you check out the entire slideshow, which I do recommend you stay to watch at the very end of this, there was this cool guy just hanging out on the other side of the fence, and I'm like, yeah, I got to get his shot. Nice composition, nice background. It just separates him nicely. Now, 35 isn't generally the type of lens that you're going to do a lot of portraits with, but for environmental type things, it's going to come in handy. I prefer an 85 for certain portraits because that's going to really isolate the background, but a 35 is a nice lens to have. This lens is priced at $14.99. currently $100 more than what Sony's offering is, and a lot more than, it's $1,000 more than the $500 35 1.8, but as a professional, you are not going to be able to beat this lens with a stick. You just have to ask yourself, do you want a zoom lens or do you want to have a fixed prime? I love using primes when I have the ability to move around and get the shot. I also love having a 28-70 f2. I love that because it is an f2 all the way through and covers the 35, the 28, the 35, the 50, 70 millimeters, so you cover quite a bit. Will they come out with a 1.2 lens? I hope they come out with one because that's going to be super unique and will create even more separation and sharpness and quality. But there are two important tests to do. We've got the sniff test and the wind tunnel test. Let's start by blowing it. It passed, barely. It barely passed the wind tunnel test. But sniff test? Let's see if it passes that. Oh, musket smoke smell. So very nice. So at the end of the day, this is a really nice lens. Compact, sharp, fast focusing, created some awesome results. And if you know what you're doing out there to tell the story, you can do it with a fixed lens like this. Now I want to show you the slideshow. I was so happy with these images. Normally we don't show you this many, but this slideshow is awesome. So stick around for this. I'm going to sign off, then watch the slideshow. Thank you guys very much for watching. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. Now here's your slideshow. See ya.